Hey, what's up? We have traveled all the way to New York City to meet with Mr. Chavat Yurli. I'm honored to be talking to the president, CEO, and founder of Crytek. Is that right, sir?
Yes, very right. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sitting down with us.
Oh, my pleasure.
So
Thank you.
this is the world unveil for the big reveal for Crysis 2.
Yes.
So you were showing it on the Xbox 360 tonight. Obviously, the first Crysis PC only game, incredibly demanding PC game. My PC is still not up to the task of running it.
Guess what? I mean, 360 will be now on PS3 too.
Sure. So I'm curious, just to start off, was it purely a business motivation behind the decision to go to consoles on this one, or did you feel like were there any kind of technical reasons, like any kind of new things you thought you could do on the consoles?
It was for me a dream to expand sandbox gameplay, the kind of things that Crytek was known for, which was sandbox, which was the visual fidelity, which was the Nanosuit. And so we said, how can we expand that? And so we started tinkering on the code, like researching all the bells and whistles of, can we actually do it? And I said to our team, guys, it's not a question of can we do it. The question is, how do we do it? Because there will be zero compromise. We cannot say we couldn't do it this and this on the console. This is Crytek. We cannot compromise. It's a war from PC to console. I mean, not a literal war. The reason why I see the word war is because in war times, in World War, the amount of creativity and innovation just exploded because they had no choice. And I said to our technology developers, you have no choice. You have to get the PC stuff over to 360 and PS3. You have to find a way, an alternative way, smarter way. So they went on and researched all the kind of things they could do on PS3 360, and step by step we wrote the technology. And you see, 2-3 years later, we got it running on 360 and PS3. All the technical features running, and plus we gained a lot of performance of rethinking this old technology, and now even the PC version runs better.
Do you expect any kind of disparity at all in terms of just like the image quality, like even the art assets, the texture resolution, that kind of thing between the PC and the console?
There's naturally some difference on PC and consoles, but not Crytek's difference per se. So we have the same attitude on PC, 360 and PS3. But the final display on 360 and PS3 relative to PC is of course compromised. But the game design has not been compromised, or the intention is not compromised. So that being said, we are pushing the PC so much that 360 and PS3 of course are lagging behind, but 360 and PS3 within their own space is going to be pushing to limits with unlike any other game.
Okay.
So our goal was not to make one game that runs on all platforms the same way. Our game was to run on PS3 360 the same way because they're about the same power. But on PC, we wanted to just be the next benchmark again, right? So, but on 360, I wanted to be the benchmark as well. And on PS3, I wanted to be benchmark as well. So, attitude has been create the same kind of kick-ass resolution assets, but whatever the engine makes out of it, to maximize the performance on each platform depends on the engine.
So moving to such a dramatically different environment, does that change the dynamic of the way that Crysis worked before with the different suit powers and your kind of freedom to move around and come up with your own solutions, or have you retained that in this setting?
New York offers us sandbox in confined spaces, but because I said also, how can we use this full potential of New York? So if you stand on the street in New York, in Manhattan downtown, and you look up the buildings, you see a lot of verticality, right? So Sandbox has been expanded into a third dimensional sandbox now. Crysis and Far Cry were featuring 2D sandboxes, effectively. They looked 3D because of 3D engine, but it was actually a 2D sandbox. And in Crysis 2, we have a proper 3D sandbox with verticality and the dimensions. So in real net play space, we actually have more play space than Crysis 2, Crysis 1, and Far Cry. So we didn't choose New York for its confined spaces. You know, we choose New York as a symbolic nature. It was purely a creative decision, not a technical decision. People say instantly, Crytek doing New York because it's easier to be done on console.
Sure.
But that's not at all about it.
So it's more of a thematic thing, really.
It's really about theme and creative and also emotional resonance.
Right.
The other part was to give it not just a resonance, but transform New York in a way that is unpredictable to players. Like give it an arc that starts from New York from the beginning till the end in a depiction and a style and level that we own as Crytek. It's like people should say this is how Crytek did it. You know, this is like and one good reference was I Am Legend, for example, a really awesome depiction of New York. You know, something that it just sticks in your mind forever. And I want to achieve a unique depiction of New York that people remember after playing Crysis 2 forever, because there's so many of them. There's so many New York movies, there's so many New York games.
Sure.
And we took the challenge of saying, we must make the coolest New York alien invasion ever.
I'm curious how the Nanosuit Powers have evolved to let you kind of tackle this bigger space that you've got to move around in.
The Nanosuit was a concept that came from PC Market with 4 choices to begin with on a mouse control.
Mm-hmm.
So we looked at how can we streamline this and make it more easy accessible. And so we took the 2 modes, which are effectively mapped to the shoulders, left and right. So very simple to access. So you pick one, and then you toggle on top of it 2 other modes, so power and tactical modes. So you actually not only is easy to get in, but there's more power to be experienced as a mastering tool. So you can have 3 modes at a time running, unlike in the first Crysis one, where you had 4 modes to choose one, and they were all much exclusive, and you could only have one at a time. So that was for me a thing that I believe will make a PC and console gamer more happy now, and drive a much better utilization of the Nanosuit, and hence also the split-second decision will be, oh, that kicks ass, instead of...
Sure. So and you've mentioned that you can upgrade some of those powers over the course of the game. Is that
Exactly.
is it purely just a matter of kind of strengthening the abilities in one area and kind of neglecting the other areas, or?
In the demo, we could see something that was like in stealth mode active, so there was a kind of a perk unlocked and bought from the in-game currency. And again, don't take the currency and buying anything as a literal, you know, it's just symbolically. And so, and what happened is that you could see the footsteps being highlighted through the geometry. And so this was a stealth unlock that the player activated. And over time, as you go through the experience, you unlock more of those to refine your stealth, your armor, your power, your tactical modes.
Okay.
So at the end, you finish up with a quite different Nanosuit experience, what you have versus what I would have or anybody else would have.
So you guys had aliens in the last game, but those aliens look very little like these aliens. Can you give us any kind of hint at all about what's going on here? What's the story with this invasion here?
I cannot dive into the story yet, but what I can say is that the benchmark for creating those aliens from outset were designed as, okay, we gotta have the best, or I don't like to speak in best terms because best is a superlative word. I want to have a new original creation of an alien that has not been done before. An experience of an alien design that is rooted into combat, of intelligence, looks menacing, sinister, sound, and look and animate differently than other aliens. Something that you will memorize, you know, as a creation, because usually aliens are descendants of either HRGJ or your Predator, or a mix of them. You know, so even in Hollywood, some movies are mixing that up and just saying, okay, we just get inspired from here. And it's a challenge because when we went with our internal and external artists on that, said, okay, what is an original alien look like? You know, how do you make it inspire Nanosuit usage? How do you make it threaten New York? How do you contrast it with the New York picture? How does it fit in the palette of New York? All those questions. And so for me, it was about ultimately creating a great gameplay experience, but one that always gives me the sense of uneasiness, sense of pressure and sinisterness, but likewise the desire to actually kick their ass as a player and use the Nanosuit to outpace and outsmart them, but also as a main mean to protect and save New York.
Well, I'm curious if the free radical guys are contributing to this project, and also like how many of your satellite studios, like what is their role on this?
There's a core team of like more than 100 people easily that works constantly on the project. So in Free Radical, there's extra to that. So there's a whole team working on the multiplayer part of the game. So Free Radical or Crytek UK are working now on the multiplayer experience as a holistic experience, have a lot of tons of experience in console on their side. Originally when we bought them, they had also a lot of fun multiplayer experience, so I enjoyed a lot of time with this. I mean, that was awesome fun. And so looking at it like this, okay, here's the learning we had from Crysis and Crysis Wars and the multiplayer areas, and here's what you can do strong. Let's look at how can we feature the Nanosuit gameplay or other things in the multiplayer design and make just an awesome multiplayer experience. So that's their objective. Okay,
very cool. Well, Sivad, I want to thank you again for your time, and before I let you go, just need you to remind us when we're actually going to see this game on shelves.
Holiday this year on PC 360 and PS3.
Very cool. Well, thanks again.
I thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Hey, I've got Richard Morgan, the lead writer on Crysis 2. But sir, lead writer is not exactly your day job. What do you do? What do you do to pay the bills when you're not writing Crysis 2?
Oh, right. Well, I was a novelist. I still am a novelist. For the last 10 years, more or less. I've been published since 2002, and that was the reason that these guys came looking for me, was actually because I'd written a series of science fiction novels, and some of them done quite well. I got optioned for movies and a couple of awards and so forth, and then out of the blue these guys ring me up and just go say, look, hey, would you like to come and write on a game? And the answer to that was yes.
Interesting. So your work has focused on science fiction so far, is it?
Yeah, all bar one. I mean, I wrote 5 science fiction novels, and the last one I wrote was a sword and sorcery sort of hack and slay type thing. But I mean, science fiction is my thing.
Sure,
really,
so something like Crysis definitely in your purview.
Oh yeah, definitely within my comfort zone.
In your wheelhouse, yeah. Okay, cool. So, despite your kind of full-time job as a novelist, you said you do have a pretty extensive history with console gaming. Can you go into that a little bit?
On and off over the last 7 years, I've seen some really cool games, seen a whole lot more that weren't, and just generally had this feeling that this is a medium that's just starting to come into its own. It's really the infancy of the industry, and the comparison I guess is like this is like working in the movies in Hollywood circa 1917 or something. It's like no one knows what the rules are. Everyone's still working out what you can and can't do. Templates aren't fixed. Different studios got different ways of doing things. There's a great feeling of potential where you can do whatever. You go to someone and say, how do we do this? And they'll say, well, we don't actually have a way of doing this, so do the way you want to, and we'll see. Now that's obviously tremendously liberating, a fantastic feeling. But more importantly for me is that I'm looking at games, especially the games that are starting to emerge now, and thinking all the good shit that goes into a decent novel ought to be transferable into a decent game. But with the add-on that you can do stuff with gaming as a medium that you can't do with a novel or a movie, because you've got that whole flexibility, you've got the sort of the open world sense, you've got the potential to have the game change depending on how you play. These are all things that fiction hasn't had before, and that for me it's like there's a huge signpost going this way, and I always wanted to see what could be done with that. So this was getting rung up and told would you like to come and be paid to do it? It's like, hey, yeah,
sure, right. Why not? What leaps out to you as the thing that is most lacking about that storytelling? Like, what are people doing wrong that is making most video game stories not that great?
Well, okay, I mean, I think there's one underlying problem is the same, and it's only fair to say that this is the same problem that exists with movies and comics as well. So it's not something specific to gaming, and that is just lowest common denominator. People sort of making a game that they figure will not upset anyone and will appeal to the broadest possible consumer base, and you usually end up with a pile of shit. But that's true for movies as well, it's true for books, it's true for every form of art. If you shoot for the lowest common denominator, you're going to arrive at the lowest common denominator, and your art will be low. So that's that. I don't think it's not really fair to remark on that for games, because that's something that all art shares. Specifically with games, the problem seems to be the lack of coordination between the guys who build the game, the level designers, the artwork guys, the AI guys, all these people, and the guy who has the cap with story written on it.
Right.
And that's because I think, very often there's been, I mean, you back up, and it's not so long, it's like 2005 that John Carmack says, story in games, that's like story in porn. There's no need for it, And now, Doom 4 is being written by Graham Joyce, who is not just a novelist, but he is a novelist of exceedingly refined, creepy fiction. It's not even full-on horror. So the times they are changing, and if you're going to employ an outside writer, because obviously that doesn't always happen, but if you're going to employ an outside writer, and that guy is, he's a screenwriter who lives in Santa Monica, and he's going to come and see you, he's going to get briefed, he's going to go away, he's going to write something, give it to you, and that's it, And like the next time he sees the game is 6 months down the road, it's not going to work. Because, never mind 6 months, within 6 weeks, what you thought was happening in a couple of levels can just be turned on its head. The guys come along and they go, actually, we were going to go up here and through here and do that. Well, we're not doing that now. We've got this instead. And there's there'll be, you'll swim, and there'll be this,
Sure.
And unless you're around to take that on board and go, okay, so we need to modify the fiction so that works. Well, yeah, obviously, if you find these things out late, and so you end up with a broken fiction, broken story. And that's what you see very much in a lot of games. Is you're going, what is this? You know, well, what it is it's a story written by a guy who didn't know or didn't choose to, stand close enough to see that a whole bunch of stuff had changed.
Did you feel any responsibility to kind of stay true to what they did with the first game, or did you kind of take what they had and, I mean, obviously, you've got a venue change from Tropical Island to New York. The aliens look different this time around. I mean, did you feel a need to kind of rip everything apart and put it back together your own way, or did you?
No, to some extent they had already ripped everything apart because, as you say, the aliens look different, the context has changed, and they were, Crytek were very good about this. They brought me in and they said, well, look, this is what we've got. Let's see what you can do. When you play the new game and get the new fiction, you're going to see these threads going back to stuff that was in the first game, but they are just threads, and it's like, I remember this from the first game. Oh wow! So, and it's like that'll be like the bit of the iceberg you can see, and then there's all this other stuff that we're running with and using to build the fiction of the second game. So there is a coherence, definitely, but I didn't feel the need to sort of to shadow the first game in any way, because that wouldn't have been very interesting. Because if you play Crysis 1, you don't want to play it again. You want to play something else. You want to be given a bunch of surprises that you didn't get in the first game.
Sure.
So no, it was great. Everybody was very flexible, and we got to milk the fiction for the maximum benefit. What would make for a really cool game story. We reference back to the first game, but it is minimal, and it's ambiguous, and it leaves an enormous amount of space for the player to put their own interpretation on things, which again I feel is a hallmark of any good fiction. Is you sketch, and your reader or your player will take the sketch and they'll go, oh wow, look, I can see all this stuff, and and they'll come up with a bunch of stuff that you are only hinting at. And say good fiction is all hints. You hint and then you let the reader do the work.
Sure.
Same thing with good games, I think.
Very cool. That sounds very promising, Richard. I would love to stand here and talk to you all day, but I'm getting the cut it off signal from off camera. So
we're done.
I'm just going to have to thank you for your time.
No problem. Real pleasure.
Thank you
Nice
very much.
meeting you.
Appreciate
Take
it.
care.